Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to jump in here, and the first month is over, so I'm going to go over every team here and give them a letter grade so far on the season. We got some teams that are performing super well with an A, some teams not doing so well with an F. Now, before I jump in, we are getting so close to 1K subscribers, so if you are new to this channel or for whatever reason haven't hit that sub button yet, please do so. We are hoping to get there by the end of the month, and we are so close. We hit 50 likes on our last power rankings video, so bonus video as promised, and really probably was going to do this video anyway. So I don't have any order whatsoever. I didn't really practice. I didn't really do anything. I'm kind of just going to go off on a whim here, talk about each team a little bit, and I shuffled the order. So we're going to just go in a random order and talk about the first team. We got the New York Mets. Now, the Mets for me have had kind of a tale of two different Aprils. The first half was a little bit rough. They were really down on the power rankings to start. Then they went on a little bit of a heater. They've played some pretty tough teams. And honestly, Lindor coming off the bench this past week after being sick and winning the game for them, that did a lot for me. And right now, I do actually consider them to be a B so far on the season. I came into the season not expecting much from them. They've had a pretty rough couple of years here. And they sold at the trade deadline last year. So didn't expect them to make the playoffs, but right now they're floating around, and to me, they're doing better than expectations. Not blowing it away, but to me, better than expectations. Next up, we got a central team, the Detroit Tigers. And for me, they're probably an A. Honestly, coming into this season to think that they probably have a good shot at winning this division. This division, I did a poll on it. 4 teams really fighting for it. Wearing the Chicago White Sox hat because this is probably the only chance I'm going to get to wear them all year because they kind of stand out in this. But Detroit, they've been winning, and they've been winning some offensively explosive games. And on the other side of things, their pitching has been pretty stellar for the most part. I think coming in and saying them at the top of this division, maybe it's not completely unexpected, but they're not underperforming. They're definitely performing at a great level, and I got to give Detroit a lot of props. Next up, we got the Seattle Mariners. This one's a little bit tougher. I'm going to probably give them a C at this point. They're kind of middle of the road as a team overall in the standings. They haven't done anything to really show me that they're ready to excel, but they haven't really dug themselves a grave either. It does help that their division has been pretty lackluster so far. Texas dealing with a lot of injuries, and Houston coming off one of the worst starts they've ever had, at least in the last decade. So Seattle right there in the middle, average, nothing really to get super excited about, but they're in the race, and that, I guess, is something to be excited about. Next up, San Diego. They've done nothing either. It's kind of the same story of Seattle. They've been right there in the middle. Sure, there's times where they look like they're the playoff caliber team, and then there's times where their pitching just gets destroyed and their bats are quiet, and it is a tough division, but for their benefit, there are other teams in this division that have struggled a little bit more. They had a little rough. They started in Korea, right? And they have at least matched up against their division very well, so I do have that going for them. Next up, my home team, we got the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm being harsh. I probably want to fail them, but at this point, I really think they are a D. Maybe this is a little bit of bias, but their bats. I could talk about their bats for half an hour. It's just not there. Top of their lineup, Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladdy, just underperforming what you would expect from this team. The pitching, on the other hand, has been there, and for the most part, Gosman had a rough start at the start, but he's turned it around, at least for now. But there is a lot of concern. This division is one that was 2 powerhouses in it already, and another team that, in my opinion, has shown a lot of spark, and unexpectedly. So right now, they're behind the 8 ball. They have a lot of ground to make up. Next up, just at random, White Sox, and this is why I wore their hat, because for me, they're an absolute failure. They're on pace to be potentially the worst team in MLB history. I know we talk about that probably every year with a team, but for me, if you watched my preview videos for the season, I did not see this coming. A lot of you guys, that was probably the number one comment when I did the division previews, was that the Chicago White Sox, they're going to be last. They're going to be last in that division. I actually had them being third, which I guess looking back is terrible, but yeah, they're a complete failure. I thought they had a little bit more promise. They did bring in a lot of veteran, a lot of pitching talent that, in my opinion, are MLB level pitchers. I thought in the division that they were in, they're at least going to be competitive, but looks like all the other teams took big steps forward, whereas they are just getting worse. So failure for the White Sox. They're probably going to be in the basement in this division for quite some time. Next up, got the Miami Marlins. A lot of people would probably consider them a failure right now, but I'm going to give them a D. They had a little bit of a rebound here this week, sweeping Colorado, so a little bit of excitement there. You can't hold too much against them, in my opinion, because their starting pitching, their depth, their starters, they got injured beyond galore. So, that is really holding them back. Do you expect that? Can you really fail them because they're suffering so much from that? There is some excitement. They have had Jazz Chisholm. He's had a couple of grand slams in April. Little bit of excitement. The offense hasn't been too bad. It's just the pitching has been pretty atrocious. So at this point, they're a D. They're going to be last in their division, and it's merely just a write-off season. I do expect them to be quite better next year. We could see them move up in the rankings if they just kind of play consistent baseball down the stretch. Next up, I got the Pittsburgh Pirates. If you ask me this 2 weeks into the season, they've been at the top. If you ask it just based on the last 2 weeks, they'd be near the bottom. So based on that, I think a C is pretty good. They're average right now. They don't seem to get much offense going on certain days, and their pitching has been pretty electric. We are excited to see their young prospect come up here, Paul Skeens. He's going to be up. It's only a matter of time. He's starting to get some length in AAA, so we'll see him come up, and that could be a big boost. This division, maybe not so wide open. They need to not fall too far behind if they're going to stay in this race. Next up, the Washington Nationals. And for me, they've had a pretty good season so far. Team that was in the bottom row of the power rankings all of last year, I think. And so far this year, they've still been in the bottom row of the power rankings, but they are being competitive day in and day out. There are times where, sure, their youngness, their lack of depth, it does come to show. They get shut out and things like that. The pitching depth isn't there. But as a grand scheme of things, with some of their young guys, like Abrams, I think they are having a pretty solid season so far, and in my opinion, doing better than I did expect them to do coming into the season. It doesn't ever help that they're in a division with two powerhouses in the Phillies and the Braves, but they have been able to beat up on the Marlins so far. Next up, I got the Oakland A's, and it's another team that has just kind of been above expectation. Can't give them an A, of course. They're not selling seats, but that's a whole different story. We won't talk about that. But they've been competitive day in, day out. They've won series a lot more than last year, probably already. I don't know for sure. But they're good. They have some skepticism, like Langoliers just not getting it done as a prospect that they might have thought he would. But overall, they've been better than average in the Oakland A's aspect. Sure, they're a below average team. But when you're looking at what your expectations were of this team coming into the season, I think they've outperformed it, so I've given them a B grade. Next up, we got the Minnesota Twins. And at this point, if you saw what they did the first couple of weeks of the season and just how they kind of fell apart, it really, really hurt them for Royce Lewis to get injured in that opening day game. But they seem to be bouncing back. They're on a 10-game winning streak, right? And the division is still theirs for. I'm going to give them a B. And a lot of that has to do with the way they've rebounded. It's been miraculous. Was it this the team that had that rotten piece of meat in their dugout, right? So that seems to be a big impact. I don't want to give them a C because at this point I think they've figured it out. And to be able to do that, I want to give a lot of credit for a team like that. Next up, the San Francisco Giants. I've been told, but this happens every year, that I underrate this team. Happens every season, happens every power rankings. So for me, I'm going to be giving them a C, because they've done nothing for me to be like, whoa, they need to be higher on the board. Or, whoa, they're really being terrible. For me, they're just being average. They're being the San Francisco Giants, team that we see all the time, be very competitive in their division. For whatever reason, they always do well. But they got to start winning outside their division. Sure, we saw them beat the Pirates this past week and a half ago. But to be able to excel past expectations, they just haven't. They're pretty much on par with expectations for me, and that is what kind of grades you to be a C. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Rays. This is another team that you could borderline fail, but I'm going to give them a little bit more time to try to sort things out. And it's going to be a battle of what teams can figure it out between the Jays and the Rays, because one of these teams is going to be last in the division at the rate we are going. I think it's going to be the Rays, but the Rays, they've kind of had their wheels fall out. Like the whole Franco thing that happened last year really deflated the tires, in my opinion, and they just haven't been able to get things going here. They're trying to figure out what their future is going to be. They lose Glass now and all that stuff, but are they going to be able to play the money ball, the low budget, all that style team in the AL East? It feels like one of those times where the tides are shifting. You couldn't be like that forever. And in my opinion, maybe that's what's happening. They haven't done anything to jump out. Next up, we got the Houston Astros. We've got to give them a little bit of credit. They did win a series against the Guardians this week, but for the most part at this point, it's a failure. Coming into the season being 300 at one point is an absolute failure for this team. I don't care what injuries you're dealing with, especially in the starting rotation. Sure, they might have 5 great starters on the IL, but to do this poorly this early in the season is not a good look for a team that has gone to the ALCS so many times over the past decade. Mind you, this has probably been a little harsh. They did win a pretty big series. They are going to have a little bit of momentum. Sure, they've probably had a lot of bad luck, but the bullpen and the Hader signing have been pretty bad for them. We'll see. I don't expect them to stay there. I do think things are changed, but if you had to grade them right here, right now, coming into the season, they are failing expectations completely. Next up, we got the Diamondbacks. Maybe you can make the same argument as the Astros. They are failing expectations. They went to the World Series last year. They're falling way behind. They're losing series. Zach Gallen's now out. A lot of issues. Are they going to make the playoffs? I don't think so at this point. So I am going to give them a D because they're falling behind the curve, and I kind of expect it to keep going that way. So Diamondbacks there. Don't know really what else to say in this division. It's very, very competitive. We talked about the Giants already and the Padres. Those teams are right now edging ahead of Arizona. So it's going to be interesting how that goes forward. Next up, I don't know, like Colorado. No question about it. They are probably, I want to see them play the White Sox. Maybe they already did and I just didn't pay attention. But those two teams are just doing absolutely terrible. Nothing seems to be coming together for the Rockies, and I don't know if maybe I've missed over it just because I haven't paid super much attention to them because they're doing so poorly. But there doesn't seem to be any outstanding breakout player on this team. I could say the same for the White Sox. They have Roberts, who did go on the IL. That did hurt them a lot. But the Rockies, I don't know where it's going to start looking better for them here. We could be looking at a 3 or 4 year rebuild for this team. Next up, we got the LA Angels, and this got to be another failure. Sure, the expectations probably weren't super high coming into the season, but they looked all right. Trout was on a double-digit home run streak. He was crushing it. Sure, his batting average wasn't doing super well, but he was smashing. They were in it because this division has been somewhat wide open for whatever reason, but now with Trout going out, the wheels have just fallen off this team, and they're definitely a bottom team. All these teams coming into the season, like, it's tough. When you come into the season, you don't ever want to be, in theory, the bottom row of my power rankings or the bottom row of the league. And all these teams are really flirting with it, and that's been pretty devastating. Next up, I don't think there's any way else to grade this team but as an A. They have been incredible considering the bullpen. The bullpen has not been able to hold the leads, and they're really missing that end of the bullpen. Batista is really starting to catch up with them in certain areas. They just came off a massive series win against the Yankees. 3 games out of 4 they took. And the young guys have been incredible for this team. This team is, I think, going to be a threat for a long time in this division. The one thing that maybe you could argue that has not gone their way is Jackson Holiday. But you can't have everything go your way either. If you're an O's fan, you came into this season and you were at the end of April, you're on top of the division, you just beat the Yankees pretty handily in a nice 4-game set, you're going to be ecstatic. This is exactly where the O's want to be. Next up, I got the Braves. Not a whole lot to say about the Braves other than they're a top team in the league, and I think that deserves an A. You kind of expected them to be there. They haven't, I guess, outperformed, but at the end of the day, an A is an A. And when a student is just putting up A's after A's after A's, you still got to give them A's, and that's what we're doing. A for A, Atlanta Braves. Next up, got the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm going to give them a B at this point. At one point, they were probably flirting with an A because the season started off so well. They really blew my personal expectations away. I don't know about you guys, but they blew that away. They've come a little bit back down to earth. They haven't had the amazing success against the interdivision matches, which I think in the long run could potentially hurt them. But right now, they're in the playoff race, And that's, I think, a big excitement definitely coming in the season. There was a big shakeup. Corbin Burns out, Woodruff out. It's a different look team, but they're definitely figuring it out, and I like to see it. Next up, got the Boston Red Sox. And guys, I could argue them being a B, but I'm just so blown away with how well they've done. I'm going to give Boston an A. At this point, they are right there in the thick, and potentially they haven't really had too many games against the division. And for that to be the case, they could come in there. They could beat Baltimore. Sure, I think they'd have played already. I think Baltimore won that one, but they haven't played the Yankees really. They haven't played the Jays. And if they can continue this kind of offensive streak they're going on, they're going to be in the talk to be a top 5, top 6 team in MLB, which is, to me, absolutely wild. Did not come into this season expecting that whatsoever. So I got to give them an A. Next up, we got Cincinnati Reds. And this is pretty simple for me because they haven't stood out. I couldn't tell you exactly how their past 2 weeks have gone, who they've played. They just haven't stood out to me whatsoever. That's either a good thing when you're a bad team, or it's a bad thing when you're a good team. So being average at this point is pretty much killing you, and that is going to be the case. Next up, we have the Texas Rangers, and for me, I have to give them a B. Sure, World Series champions. Basically been around 500, but the injuries they've just been dealing with, they're basically riding on the back of Eovaldi in the starting rotation. And some of their bats, Young out for that long really hurts them, right? So guys, with this division up for grabs, they got to be at least excited with where they are coming into the season. They're competitive. They're beating the Astros. That's pretty much all you can ask for as a Texas Rangers fan. Are they excelling? Sure. They're not excelling, but it's kind of where we expect them to be, if not a little better. Next up, Kansas City Royals. And I have seen a lot of the Royals, so it's a little biased maybe because I've seen them play the Jays 7 games. But I am giving them an A because I think they are possibly the best team in that division so far, and it has to do with their lethal starting rotation, just absolutely crazy. I saw a lot of Bobby Witt Jr., of course, when they played the Jays, so that may be impacting it, but it's hard to argue that the Royals should be anything less than A, maybe a B+, but Royals, great start. Another Central team, maybe it's just a strategy here, but we see another Central team at the top here. To me, the Central has been this weak division in the AL for so many years now. Maybe that's part of why I have 3 of them as an A right now. But to look and see that they are going to be competitive against the AL East, they're going to probably beat up on the AL West at this point. I got to give a lot of props to how the AL Central has been. So there you have it. Next up, got the St. Louis Cardinals. And for me, they're probably a B. I thought they were going to be a lot worse than they have been. The pitching seems to be there. Sonny Gray has been pretty good for them so far. And they're in that division. I'm not counting them out of a playoff spot whatsoever, which probably might have thought at the beginning that was going to be the case. But the Cardinals got to be pretty excited. This season is far from over for them, and that's pretty much the case. Next up, I have the LA Dodgers. Sure, they might be the best team in the National League West. Sure, all that stuff. But they have not performed in certain aspects super well. So I'm going to give them a C. It's pretty average. Probably a little bit below where you would think an average of an LA Dodgers team would be. We see Mookie Betts, all those guys smashing. They're going to figure it out. They're going to maybe become a B, A at the end. They're going to figure it out. So I'm not worried about them, but at this point, coming in the season, maybe it's just a slow start, a lot of moving pieces. We're going to see Walker Buehler coming back and all that fun stuff. But C, I think, is pretty reasonable. Next up, New York Yankees. For me, I'm giving them a B. They've had a good start to the season, but they are the Yankees, and there's a lot more pressure on a team like the Yankees than anyone else. The signing of the trade to Juan Soto is paying off massive. If they can leverage that into a big contract and keep him around, he might be the best paid baseball player of our generation here coming up. But to lose to the Orioles, not be the leader of the division at this point is a little bit of a failure, so that does knock them back. And we got 2 teams left, and this one is the Philadelphia Phillies. Another team that is pretty similar to the Yankees. They've had a good start. Wheeler had a little bit of a shaky start, but he seems to have found his form a little bit. They got Nola. They have a lethal lineup. At the whole, you would expect them to be in the playoff race, if not a playoff spot, almost guaranteed. But for them, they're not winning the division, and for them to have an A, in my opinion, they have to beat the Braves. They have to figure this out, find a way to do it. I guess they always find a way in the postseason, so they do have that going for them. And last team, one team that absolutely surprising me as well. Gonna have to give them an A at this point, and it's the Chicago Cubs. They're on top of their division. They got Shota, who's just setting records in his first 6 starts now, I think he's had, and it's been an incredible season for the Cubs. We'll see if they can keep it up. This is a pretty competitive division. It's kind of seeming like the Centrals are the 2 strongest, interesting, closest race divisions in all of the MLB, which I guess has kind of been the case for the NL Central for quite some time. It's been pretty shuffly over the past couple of years. But there you guys have it. It's pretty interesting. We're only 1 month into the season, and we have like a lot of teams that are kind of performing better than expectation, which really hurts other teams like the Jays, Diamondbacks, and Rays, who just are way behind. It's like creating this strong middle in the MLB that's going to be tough. If you're not playing good baseball, you're going to fall behind. And that has been such an exciting start to the season. Like and subscribe for more, guys. I am doing power rankings every Sunday night. As you know, we're closing in on 1K. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Peace out. We'll see you for that next video.